Welcome to the In Between podcast. Today I am chatting with Tara Austin, an entrepreneur and the founder of the e-commerce and retail shop Ruthie Grace Boutique. Welcome to the In Between podcast.
Well, thank you, Cassidy. I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes.
I think it's going to be a good show.
Me too. And I'm so excited because I don't think we've had someone on who has the experience in retail and e-commerce, which, as many of my listeners are either business owners or want to be, I think it's such an incredible conversation because, you know, you get a lot of service-based or completely e-commerce, and you have experience with both. So I'm excited. I would love to start the conversation with why you chose to go the route of boutique style. And were you always into fashion? Is it something that you were passionate about or you just kind of fell into?
Yeah, so growing up, I've had just a love of clothes since I could ever remember. It's always been something I've enjoyed. My grandmother, who is actually her middle name is one of the names of Ruthie Grace. So it was named after both of my grandmothers. She used to take me and my sister shopping multiple times a year, and I'm the oldest of three girls, and she always was very intentional about each of us had like our own shopping day. And so we would take the time to plan out our day and what stores we were going to go to and where we were going to eat and what outfit we were even going to wear to go shopping. And so I just grew up just loving the experience of shopping and clothes, and just the creative side of like putting pieces together has just been something that I've enjoyed my whole life. And, you know, I grew up just kind of thinking, okay, if I'm going to do anything in the fashion world, well, modeling's out because I'm only 5'2". Design, that's going to be hard because I don't know how to draw. And so it was, okay, really, where's my future here? And I don't think I really considered styling. And I thought, okay, well, fashion merchandising, maybe that's an opportunity. But it just didn't seem like a really promising career path, honestly. Like there just wasn't, it was kind of like this understanding like retail is just hard and there's not a lot of opportunity for money or anything like that. And so I pursued a completely different career path when I went to college. So I have a degree in animal science. I wanted to get my master's in animal reproduction, and that's just kind of where I went. That was like the path that I was going down. Well, in 2009, I graduated college and I was newly married, and it was in the middle of the recession, and it was really hard for me to get a job. So I got a job working as a customer service representative for an insurance agency, and I just did not like it. People are not happy to call their insurance agent. No. You know, let's just say that.
That's a difficult job.
Yeah. And so anyways, about this time is really when this idea of boutiques were kind of coming on the scene. Historically, they had been known to be like exclusive, high end, kind of for an older customer, things like that. But it was like this little sneak peek of what we would consider fast fashion, I think, was kind of starting to come on the scene. And I wouldn't even say that boutiques at the time were fast fashion, but this mentality that they could be more reliable and consistent for more everyday wear was kind of started to evolve. And so I stumbled across a boutique in the town that I lived in. They had just opened it. Everything was $50 and under. They had new arrivals all the time, and they were leveraging social media platforms to show their new stuff. And it was like this whole new world that never existed. And I remember watching it and I was like, I can totally do this. Like, this is like right up my alley. Like, I think I could figure out social media. I think I could like do a really good job of buying. And so, yeah, I was 23 years old. And when I opened my store, and that's kind of it. Like, I just took the leap of faith, and my family supported me. And I started out really small in a 900 square foot, like, historical building. And I was like brick and mortar only. I didn't have an online store, but I posted everything on social media. And that's really where we started. And that's just kind of the beginning of the story. So
that is incredible. Kudos to you for starting at 23. I feel like I think about myself at 23. I'm like, man, I would not know where to go. But I think that's entrepreneur. Like, that is being an entrepreneur, right? Like, it doesn't matter what age. You don't really know what's going on. You just kind of figure it out along the way.
That's true. Like, there's no, like, I mean, you just have to have the passion inside of you to figure it out. Like, there's no level of wisdom, age, maturity that really gets you started. Like, that is the key factor that makes you start, right? Like, because you can have all the wisdom in the world, but if you're not you got to have that, like, no fear. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to take the plunge. I'm going to make the step. And it just happens. I mean, I do think being young and 23, I was a little bit more naive, and like, I didn't have the world resting on my shoulders, you know, like I didn't have a children to support or anything like that. So the risk didn't seem as big. But looking back, I'm like, man, that was a pretty big step for a 23-year-old.
It definitely is. And I think it's like, especially at that time, people are graduating, they're trying to get into their careers. And for you to just completely change your path, it is risky. And it is awesome that you trusted yourself to do that. And what do you feel during that time, if you kind of take yourself back there, was the biggest fear that you had to overcome? Like, obviously, I assume you either took out your own money to start this business or had to get some sort of help. Yes. So I'm sure that felt risky. But what, from your perspective at that time, was like, oh, this is kind of scary?
I think the thing that was the most scary is just was I doing it right? More than anything. I mean, I did have to get financing from the bank. They were willing to, give me the financing. I had a line of credit. None of it was self-funded. So I don't remember being terrified that I wouldn't be able to pay that back. Mm-hmm. I just remember thinking, I can do this. I just want to figure out how to do it as best as I possibly can. Like, the fear of it working wasn't there. It was the fear of it working and then figuring out I was doing it all wrong. And
having to kind of go back and...
a lot of it was just all the unknown, I think, culminated. It was like, I had never worked retail in my life prior to owning my own store. Yeah, like, it was like everything about it was new. But I kind of embraced that with like, this is a learning curve, and I'm just kind of like walking into it with like excitement and curiosity. But there were definitely moments where the financial pressures earlier on felt really scary. But I look at what I thought was really scary earlier on and what I've gone through as the business has grown, and I'm like, man, I'd trade that risk right back there for the ones I have right now. But yeah, yes. So I mean, it's wild to look back and see like how we grew and how we evolved. And it wasn't until about 4.5 years in that we actually opened up our online store. So the storefront really carried us for a long time, because e-commerce just wasn't what it was at that point. It was around. It's just people were only shopping online for larger brands. They weren't really expecting to see a ton of small brands coming online.
How was that transition for you? I mean, I'm sure that as it was all happening, you're like, okay, we need to get into the e-commerce space, but it's also a lot different than retail. So how did you navigate those changes?
Yeah, so when we decided that we were going to do e-commerce and we were going to really grow it, a lot of what really took me to that place and that step was whenever Facebook, now known as Meta, really like first launched their advertising platform, and you had to pay to play. It was so cheap. It was so cheap to advertise on platform because the supply was there and the demand wasn't. And so what happened was there were a lot of other retailers like me at the time who we were kind of neck and neck in regards to like what you could see on the surface, such as like, social media followers, all these different things. Well, they were able to, because they had an online store when advertising first came around with Meta, they were able to scale pretty quickly. And I started noticing like, oh, shoot, they're like really passing me up, and they're passing me up substantially. And it was really like the snowball was just forming pretty quickly. And so I was pretty much in a panic mode, like, I need to be able to get my website up. And so I got my website up, and then it took some time for me to shift from like a brick and mortar focus towards online. And so we really had to shift all of our attention to like e-commerce first, storefront second. And we just kind of had to hope that like, hey, the storefront customer can be an online customer as well. They can be in both places, but the online customer cannot be the storefront customer. And so we really had to say like, okay, we're going to give online people the first dibs, and then, and storefront customers will get second in regards to our inventory. And then as the demand became bigger, we were eventually able to like separate the inventory to be able to house it in different places. And then we could transfer back and forth should we need to. But, that was, to me, like the biggest regret that I have in business was not advertising sooner. Because when you look at the greats of kind of what I do in my area, I think that not only did they have good businesses, but they also were in the right place at the right time. And I think they had a lot of advantage there because they were able to advertise. And I was there. Like, I was there. I just wasn't like set up to do it. And so, that was one of my biggest regrets. So I learned that mistake. And then during COVID, when things started going down, a lot of people, like, the first thing they'll pull is their ad dollars. And I was like, no, I've learned from this before. If people are pulling out, that means it's going to get cheaper. So I'm going to, like, grin and bear it and stay steady and hold the line. And it worked. So, like, you really do live and learn. There's not failures. There's just lessons. And that was something that I was like, okay. So I learned from that mistake, and I was able to make the right decision the next time that circumstance kind of presented itself. So
that mindset's so important, because I think when people view it as failures, they just won't try again, or they'll just, give up essentially. And it's like, if you're actually able to remove yourself from the situation and view it at a bigger scale and be like, what went wrong to avoid it the next time, just like you did, there you go. You had a success.
For sure. Yeah, so that's just kind of the evolution of the business. We outgrew, like, our first location, moved to a second location, and then we moved to a full-blown warehouse in 2017 to be able to, like, really, like, nurture the online store. We shut down our storefront for a couple years while we were waiting for a new retail development, and then we opened that retail development, that location of that storefront at the end of 2020. So those years in between, like, beginning of 2020 to, like, 2024, there's, like, I think is, like, there's so much that happened in my business in those years, and we can get to that if you want to talk about it. But, like, everything for me is, like, pre-COVID, and then there's after COVID. And it was just I think for a lot of businesses, it was a moment in time. And if you look historically and you look at, like, what's happening in the economy and the business world, like, things like COVID impacted businesses in certain ways. And it's like, those 4 years were like this unknown, really high, then it was like a black swan event, and it's like, it was not business as usual, I guess is what you could say. And I feel like we're kind of entering into business as usual in 2025.
Yeah. Oh, of course. It's just now resurfacing, because all of those people that, like you said, in COVID were high highs, low lows, are just now trying to even out and get back onto a normal page, and our world as a whole. Like, I mean, It took forever to even feel normalcy after what happened.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, so that's kind of my story, I think, in a nutshell. Like, if I summarize, like, my career over the last 14 years is, it's really been kind of a journey of trying to build and scale. It's been a wild ride. Entrepreneurship will always surprise you.
Yes. No, and it will. And I do want to switch over more to the personal side of stuff now that we kind of know your story about building your business. And I'm sure there's so much that we left out, but I love to focus on the individual as well, because I think our businesses are a reflection of, what's going on internally and how we're caring for ourselves and all of those things. What do you feel personally was one of the biggest in-betweens that you dealt with amidst also continuing to run your business and show up every day?
Oh man. Well, I guess if I was to look at, like, my personal life and look about the journey of that, there was a long season in the beginning of trying to figure out how to provide for myself financially. It was a really long time of always putting myself last. Trying to grow the business, I was constantly trying to, like, reinvest into growing and scaling. And I kind of had this mentality of, like, if I can just get my top line revenue up, then I'll be able to make XYZ. Well, being in retail, specifically clothing, a lot of that money gets always eaten up by inventory. And so, like, I basically would, like, put inventory first and do all these things first, and then there was just nothing left over for me. So it took me a really long time to get to the place of being able to feel comfortable and confident in the fact of, like, actually paying myself a reasonable salary based on what I felt like my worth was to the company. So that was a really interesting journey for a long time. And looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I would have learned that lesson earlier on. I wish I would have allowed myself to feel my value inside the company and not feel like I needed to be the one to eat the scraps. And that's what I did for a really long time. Another in between that we really struggled with for a long time was the fact that my husband worked in a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 job. And then I was running the business. And so obviously, as a business owner and being married, even though he worked a separate career, we definitely felt the weight of carrying the business together as a team. And so being able to share in the inner workings of what was taking in the business, like, we knew that we always wanted him to be able to leave his job and come alongside me and be able to, like, kind of just live entrepreneurship life together. We knew that, like, I knew that it would be super helpful for him to be able to do things financially for us, take off some of like the administrative tasks, payroll, things like that that I was doing that would weigh me down and take away some of the creative side of what I was really good at. And we needed him to be able to do that. So it wasn't until 2020, actually, that we were able to evaluate our life and be like, okay, I think, maybe now's the time that we can actually take that step and that leap of faith and let him leave his full-time salary and come work with me. So part of that decision, though, was we were forced into that decision because I don't honestly know if we would have made it had we not found out that I was pregnant with our third child. So we had two boys at the time, and crazy story is my husband actually had a vasectomy, and then 2.5 years later, I found out I was pregnant. So yeah, wow. It was a huge surprise. Like, we were not expecting that. The Lord obviously had a third child in mind for us. And so like it was in the middle of COVID, like literally I found out I was pregnant February 26th. And then the first case of COVID was in Texas in our county, March 5th. So like I had just found out I was pregnant with my third baby, post vasectomy, very like trying to receive that and accept it was mind blowing. And then COVID happened. So that year was a lot of overwhelm for me. There was just a lot of things happening in a very short amount of time. And so that moment that situation was what pushed us to like, okay, there is no way I can grow this business at the rate that it was growing during COVID year with all the stress that I had and having a third baby. I was like, I can't do this by myself. Like it's just not possible anymore. Like I've got to have access to you. And him being in a job just didn't allow me that. So we made that step at the end of 2020. And that has brought its own challenges in a certain way, like working alongside your spouse. But I think we've done a really good job of doing it. But it's also a huge blessing because it allows us to tag team entrepreneurship and raising a family. And that is a very hard balance to take care of. Like it is just really challenging. It's just, I mean, whether you're an entrepreneur or just a parent in general and you're working, like it is hard. It is just really challenging. But in 2022, I went through a season of severe anxiety and depression. I think, like hindsight, it was a combination of extreme burnout, overworked, a lot of like post-COVID trauma, the surprise of the pregnancy. It was just the culmination of the stress, I had just like a really heavy, dark season at the end of 2022. One thing that I didn't add was we decided to open a men's store in 2022 too. So in a 1.5 year time, I had an unexpected delivery and pregnancy. COVID happened. I opened my Ruthie Grace storefront and I opened Forged 86, which was our men's store. My husband left his job. We expanded our warehouse. Like, there was all these things happening at the same time. And I think my body just couldn't take it anymore. It was too much.
Well, I mean, anyone would. That is a lot to happen in the midst of like a global pandemic and all that comes with that as a business owner, as a mom, as an individual. So, and as of course a pregnant woman, and that time I feel like adds to the stress of not knowing what was going on and being scared for your kids to get it, your husband, or of course yourself. So what changes have you made since? Obviously, I assume that you took some time to recover and treat those traumas. And how has that recovery been now? We're in 2025. What are the things that you do to hopefully avoid another
episode
of anxiety, depression, just overwhelming stress?
So what I'm doing is I started seeing a therapist, like a counselor. I was seeing her weekly in the beginning, but now I just see her once a month. And just really continuing to work through like those traumas from that experience and just unpacking like, what led there, what beliefs did I have that led me to like really fall into the trap of anxiety and how to break down those strongholds and those fears. And so that's like cognitive behavioral therapy. And then I go and I see a wellness doctor and we work on things such as balancing my hormones, things like that. And then just really like focusing on health and nutrition in order to make sure that, like my body is optimized to perform at the best level that it should. And even outside the environment of stress, I do try to do things like focus on being outside. I really try to not work as much in the evenings, which I say that I have worked quite a bit lately just because of I'm under a project. But honestly, Cassidy, if I was to tell you, I think the experience alone was just like huge. And I hope that I never have to walk through that again. But the lessons that I learned, I think I just know how to identify it now. And I can call the anxiety out for what it is. I can also receive days where I maybe don't feel very inspirational or low mood. And then I also just work within, I'm a female, I've got a monthly cycle. Like, I just need to know that, like, some days of the months, I'm just not going to feel my best. And some days I'm going to feel really great. So, I mean, honestly, like, it's really just about learning to take care of myself. But I also think in all things, you can overdo it to where you can almost force yourself to be like so strict with what you eat and all these things that you can cause your own anxiety. And so I really try to hold space in my life just for stillness. We really try to do that as a family. On the weekends, if we don't have something scheduled, we just hang out, and we try not to overbook ourselves. So it's really just using like caution about my commitments and really respecting my time and my energy. And so that's been the biggest thing. So
I love that. Were there certain beliefs that you uncovered during that time that you now catch yourself in? For instance, maybe it was imposter syndrome, or maybe there was a certain belief as to why, at the beginning you were not wanting or not feeling that you could pay yourself enough. Like, all of those things, are there beliefs now that you've uncovered and kind of untwisted to now hold a different belief?
I think for me, one of the biggest beliefs that, like, I think that I thought, and this isn't necessarily tied to the anxiety, maybe it is. I think I was so stressed when the sales were not coming in 2022 like they had in 2020 and 2021. And I was so panicked, like thinking it was like, what am I going to do? This is terrible. Like, I just really remember thinking like, this is hard. What if we don't get out of this? And then I had to walk through that whole season, and things haven't necessarily gotten better since then. Like, and so what I thought was the worst, things have just in some cases gotten harder and worse. But I've looked at those circumstances completely different, because I'm like, what I really truly believe to be true is that when businesses go out of business or they fail, it's really the choice of the owner. It's not because they just tried everything and it failed. Like, I think I've really taken ownership of, like, it doesn't necessarily happen to you. You get to make the choice, and you get to choose to fight, and the choice to close it is yours. The choice to give up is yours. And you just keep fighting for it. And so I've kind of shifted my perspective of, like, taking ownership of my fight and my desire to push through, and just really like using that as what drives me. And so I've seen, like, so the disappointments don't hurt as bad. The disappointments don't set me back as far. The disappointments don't affect my mood and my attitude as much. Like, I just really have seen myself shift very differently. It's really good. So it's super refreshing.
It sounds like what you've done is really build resilience. Like,
yes.
Get pushed down, get back up, get pushed down. Okay, I'm going to get back up. And every time maybe that push down gets a little bit harder and you return a little bit stronger. And I think that's what makes an incredible entrepreneur and a lasting entrepreneur, because the thing is, like, there are still going to be hard times. They may be even harder than you thought the hardest one was.
Yes.
But if you are able to be resilient, if you are able to say, okay, well, no matter what, we're going to get creative, we're going to try something new and move on, that's what creates longevity. Like, that's what makes you successful.
Yes. And I have, like you, I've studied a lot of successful entrepreneurs and, like, read about their story. And I find comfort in knowing, like, it's almost like I embrace, like, make it harder, because I know that, like, it's going to prove that the success that I will achieve in the long run is going to be that much bigger. You know what I mean? It's like the greatest of greats, however you define that, they have gone through the deepest failures. Like, the bigger the failure, the greater the success. I really believe that. And so, I've heard, like, I was reading a story the other day about like the owner of FedEx. Like, they had $5,000 left, and he like wasn't going to be able to pay the gas surcharges for the next day, and so he went to like a casino and gambled it. And he won, and he made enough money to be able to pay for the fuel charges for the next day. And so,
That's
like,
wild.
yeah, and like, look at what FedEx is. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just, you don't realize that there are these stories behind the scenes that take place in the in between of major setbacks, but that is ultimately what leads to the greatest triumphs. And I just keep embracing that process. And so I've really walked through kind of a season two of just like asking the Lord, just like, will you turn over every stone? Will you show me every area that I like need to improve and refine? Will you help me see the things where there are cracks? And I realized the risk in asking for those things. I knew it was going to turn up a lot, but it's turned up a lot for me. But it's been good because it's allowed me to address areas that need room for improvement. And so it's been hard, but it's also really good. I kind of feel like if I'm ever going to get the business to the next level, like I know that I've had to walk through all of this. So,
asking those questions and asking the Lord to reveal those things to you is so, so crucial in my opinion, because it's like, had you asked those questions 2 years ago, you wouldn't have been ready to take on the answers, right? And
correct.
Now you're at a place where the version of you who you are is ready to see those things, even if they're not fun to see, and fill in the cracks or make the changes that might be risk. And so I commend you for asking those questions, but also be willing to receive them and not just shy away from what you're being told.
Yeah, because the only way forward is through it. Like, there is no getting around it. And that's what I've learned in entrepreneurship. Like, you cannot bypass a certain part of the learning curve. Like, you cannot. You have to go through it. So you might as well figure out how to look at it from a positive perspective and look at the opportunities to gain the wisdom and knowledge. Because, like, I can tell you right now, like, I've never done what I haven't done. And I tell people, like, especially when I'm talking to my team about being a leader, I'm like, I've never been a CEO in this circumstance before. And next week, I'll never been a CEO in that circumstance. So, like, I'm always going to be learning, and I'm always going to be refining, and I am never going to assume to have it all figured out. In fact, I'm just going to embrace the fact that I don't. And so, and I tell them, same thing goes for you. Like, you've never been a content marketer in this circumstance. You've never been an operations manager in this circumstance. Like, I realize it's all new to us, but we have to take what we do have in experience and embrace what's ahead and be able to figure out how to navigate our way out of it, and just be thankful for the room for improvement and opportunity. Like, the past is in the past. We can't change it. So let's just move forward. And that's kind of been our mentality and our focus over the last, especially going into 2025. We've really had to regroup a lot, and we've had quite a few changes. So here we are.
What a powerful way to lead others and your team especially, because I think we do have leaders in this world that tend to focus on what they're incredible at and how great they are and lead from that perspective, which leaves such a gap in between, leader, CEO position and anything below that essentially. But to lead in a way that says, hey, I don't always know what I'm doing either, but I have to figure it out because I'm a CEO. And you as, a content marketer also have to figure it out. And we're just going to use what we have to come together and collaborate. And I assume that is a huge value to you, to show up as the person who is going to figure it out no matter what. What other values, maybe from your personal life or that you've learned along the way, have you brought in to build the culture of what your business is today?
That's a great question. I feel like culture is it's actually something we're like really, or I'm actually really working on right now in the business, because we kind of went through a phase of like me and then my operations manager or general manager, and then everybody else was kind of all on the same playing field. And then we kind of restructured and tried to do an organizational chart, and we kind of tried to like take everybody that was here and flip them up to where there was more like a stack. Well, that was a hard transition because people who used to have a certain level of input authority kind of got demoted underneath somebody else. In order to reach me, they had to go up through the ladder. But we had to like do that because there were so many different like opinions and touch points and too many people to keep organized coming in at the same time. So we did that. And then what happened was is in the process of reorganizing it, we really lost a lot of the culture because we locked people into certain responsibilities and certain levels of authority. And so that camaraderie and that community really started to lose itself, as well as owning a business that has separate locations. So I've got storefront staff and I've got warehouse staff. And the problem with those is it's really hard to cross collaborate those teams because they have different work hours, different locations. And so, trying to build that culture was really hard. And so I think in 2024, it was the like exposure of the lack of culture that I felt like I had maintained. And I wouldn't say that everybody was dissatisfied in their job, but I definitely think there were people that felt disconnected from me. And so when you have a smaller business and you have just one, like for example, like when we didn't have the storefront, we were just online and we were in one warehouse. Well, every employee down to the people just filling orders, like through conversation and just being in an open environment, like they were aware of what was going on. They could hear conversations. And it's not that those conversations were private or not private. They were just heard and like because they were open, like, and it's not that information was necessary to their job. They just heard it because they were in the physical presence of us. Well, as we started having this separation of like, okay, we're having like executive meetings that are at this table and no one's there, like slowly but surely they felt more and more removed away from like understanding what was really happening in the business. And so at the end of 24, I think the implications of that really exposed itself. And I realized that I had a team that was like, I really needed them to rally around the company and I needed their buy-in 100%, but I hadn't given them what they needed to be 100% bought in. So I've had to like really focus and reshift my thoughts on those things. And so I do things like I host huddle meetings twice a week where it's like a 15-minute like quick breakout, like where we do a fun icebreaker. It's a quick overview of like, these are the products that came in. This is where we are, our sales target. Like these are the housekeeping and HR updates. These are the things we're celebrating. And, it's just quick, but it gets everybody in the room. It gets everybody face to face and allows us to be able to have that team community that we really want. So ultimately, like I am a firm believer in the fact that you can have an A-team player, but without an A-team culture and an A-team system, they're just not going to show you those skill sets. And so a lot of my efforts have been focused on, like, I'm not even focused on, is this an A-team player or not? I'm focused on, like, do I have an A-team system and do I have an A-team culture? Because I actually believe that C and B players can rise to the occasion if they have the expectation and the community around them to bring them up, and that's like, I think, like we're not going to let the lowest person bring us down. I think we have a really strong team that's constantly leveling each other up. And so that's kind of the culture that I'm trying to build right now. And so far it's going well. So I'm really excited about it.
I can't imagine managing all of those people and different viewpoints and personalities and perspectives. That's difficult in itself, let alone maintaining a culture that is positive, that gets everyone's buy-in, that everyone feels seen. So that's incredible that you are able to be transparent about that and then ask yourself, okay, what can we change to make it even better?
Yeah. So it's people make business hard, like, and that's a reality of it. And I think that's the biggest struggle a lot of business owners have is the employee aspect. It's like managing their team. And also as a CEO and a founder, you realize like your success is not your own. Like you're very dependent upon your staff to be able to help carry the torch and do all the things for you. And so like, a lot of your job is making sure that they're set up for success. Like that's a lot of your job. And, and that's what it takes to scale the company. And so, that's where a lot of my focus has been over the last year and obviously moving into 2025. So.
Yeah, it is. Business is hard. And it's also, I think when you break it down, it can be as simple as these are humans who at the end of the day want to feel connection, feel appreciated, feel loved, and know that they're building something that's bigger than themselves, right? I think sometimes we also make it so complicated. And I love that you've really taken it down and been like, okay, what are the basics that we need to be implementing every week to make sure that everybody's on the same page, they're feeling appreciated, they're feeling seen, and then we're connecting as a team when we all have our individual roles and jobs to do.
Yep. It's really important. It is a huge oversight that I think a lot of business owners don't consider. Like, it's one of those things, like, you don't realize you're not doing it until you find out you're not doing it. And then
Yes.
you get to that point and you're like, oh shoot, okay, now I've got to like figure this whole component out. And it has nothing to do with the skills, the hobby, the passion. It has nothing to do with clothes. It's like, it's a whole new level of understanding. But in the same way, like, okay, maybe I haven't been the best leader in the past, but now I can be. And it's just, honestly, I think everything is a skill that can be learned. You just have to have the want to. And so it can be learned. It may not come naturally to you. For some people, some of those things do, but for some, it can be a skill set that can be learned. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. So
I love that you said that, because I totally agree. I think you can teach somebody anything, but you can't make them passionate. You can't make them, like you just said, the buy-in, right? Like that part, someone's either going to have that for what you're building or they're not. But you can teach them any of the skills, right? You can place them anywhere and they're going to be able to learn how to do that. But if they're not in it, they're not going to carry that through.
Correct. Yep. I believe that 100%. So
what advice, if someone's listening right now and they've maybe been interested in getting into the retail or the e-commerce field, getting into more of like a product-based business, potentially starting one or joining one, what advice would you give them going into it if you could kind of speak to your 23-year-old self?
I think one thing that I would say that's very different from when I started to now, I'm going to address it. It actually is wildly different to start a retail business now than it was when I started. I think the thing is that you should be able to build your influence first before you ever try to sell somebody a product. And what I mean by that is, like, if you actually want to get into selling clothes, then you need to be uniquely known for being good at styling clothes and influencing clothing purchases. And then I think you take that influence once you've built up that audience, and then you translate it into something that you can monetize. I think that comes for anybody in any area of the industry, no matter what industry. I think it's the same principle that actually applies across the board, is you just, now it's all about being able to have influence and eyeballs on you first, and then having the product second. Because ultimately, you have to make an investment somewhere. So let's make the investment in people first, and then we'll make the financial investment in the product. If you go make the financial investment in the product first, it's going to take you a lot longer time to recoup that investment than going and trying to find the people. And so for me, I think people make mistakes by trying to be like, I'm going to go open an online store website, and they have no influence, and they just do it. Like, they just do it because it's really hard. There are so many people in this industry in so many areas, and with social media, like, it's just so much that I think it's really hard to get people's attention. So I think you should focus on building attention first, and then step into the world of opening a store.
That is such a great point, and I'm so happy that you said that, because it has changed so much, and it's almost completely reversed if you think about it. Where people would open stores and then they're like, okay, the people are going to come, and now it's totally reversed. And I feel like the risk is just a little bit less, because you have all these people that are bought in. They're like, okay, we love what you're doing. We love how you style things. If you're going to sell it, I'm going to buy it. And I think you're right. It goes with other industries too. If you're a personal trainer and you're talking all about supplements, and you have the audience, and then you make supplements, it's like, okay, those people already trust. It's what we call in marketing, like the like no trust factor. You've already established that. And so the sale is right there.
Yeah, and it's proof. It's social proof that you are actually good at what you do. And even though it's different, I will tell you this, like, Ruthie Grace is in the hometown that I grew up in. Like, I grew up in this area. So when I opened my business, I actually did what I just said. Like, I took my existing influence in my community and I gave them a product. And so that helped serve me really well, and it's what helped me get on my feet really quickly, was that I was in an area that I had already established influence. And so I think that's where a lot of people can go wrong, is they have an idea or a passion project and they want to do it, but they don't have any built-in influence. So it's going to take a lot of time to build that momentum, to have that social proof, to have that trust before people are really going to be glued in. and in retail, it's a pretty low cost entry, like barrier entry, in the sense like you can make a website pretty cheaply, you can start a social media page for free, and the cost of buying the inventory, you can start pretty low. But it's actually hard when you can start cheap, but it's actually hard to gain momentum when you start cheap. It really takes to do it right, it actually needs a pretty substantial upfront investment. And I'm talking, like, I personally would think like 50 grand. Like, that's what I think, like anywhere around that amount. But again, if you don't have the influence, and you really don't have a long time to sell your clothes, because product turns really quickly. So it's not like, the lifespan of your inventory is anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, and then it's seasoned out. So it's like, you got to be prepared to the fact that, like, you're going to have to move that inventory pretty quickly. So I think knowing that you have a highly captivated audience is just really crucial to being successful.
Yeah, I totally appreciate you sharing that. Are there any resources that, as someone in the market now, you would recommend? Maybe it's podcast or book or course that someone could dive deeper into this?
Yeah, so I'm a member of the Boutique Hub. It's a group organization that has a bunch of courses, and they have a community. I would recommend starting there because I know they have a lot of online resources and courses that could be really helpful. Other than that, there's really not a ton of resources. I spend a lot of time listening to the Operators podcast. They're really big in the D2C world, which is very similar to what I do, but some of them are consumer good products, things like that. I hope in the near future, I have done some education and courses over the past, but in the near future, I really do plan to continue to expand on my online and education platform. I just haven't been able to take on the capacity, haven't had the bandwidth for that just yet. I've tried a little bit, but to really jump out and do that, like, I'm just haven't gotten to that point. So hopefully in the near future, I can refer to myself. But for the time being, the Boutique Hub is a great place to start.
Perfect. Well, people will have to follow you to keep up when that time comes. That'll be so exciting. I always love to end the show asking what advice you would give someone who's in the in-between. I think that in this case of this episode, focusing on that business related in-betweens, and what advice you would give them.
I think for me, I would accept that the in-between is a place that everybody has to be, and everyone has to go there. And the time in which you stay there is based upon your decision to look at the past and decide to make a new future. But know that you're also going to just always live there. Because as an entrepreneur, you're never really going to get to the place of arrival. Because if you're truly an entrepreneur at heart, you're going to have visions and ideas and new concepts and new offers and new product all the time. So the more that you become comfortable in the in-between, the more you'll actually enjoy the process and the journey and where you are at that moment.
I love that. That's so true. Yeah. And it's, instead of avoiding the in-between, stay in it for a little bit, because you might learn a thing or two, and you just come out stronger. You build that resilience that we were talking about.
You do. You really do. It's truly a gift. You'll learn that it's a gift. But sometimes it's got to be really daggum hard before you get there.
Yes, it definitely sucks. But when you come out the other side, there is power in it. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Yes. I would love for you to share where people can shop, where people can follow you and shop and follow Ruthie Grace.
Awesome. So you can follow me personally at Tara Grace Austin on Instagram. And you can follow my business at Shop Ruthie Grace or www.shopruthiegrace.com.
Perfect. And we'll put all of that in the show notes for you guys to shop and check out Shop Ruthie Grace. Thank you so much for listening to the In Between podcast. Make sure you give us a follow at In Between Convos. Have a great day.